They called her the family stain. For 21 years, Vela Morn survived in the shadows of her three older brothers, treated not as kin, but as a burden to be hidden, beaten, and starved into silence. She was the wolf-less daughter of a once proud bloodline, the shameful secret of the Hollowfang pack. Her brothers told the world she was simple-minded. They told her she was worthless. But they didn't know what slept coiled in her marrow. They didn't know that the bruises they left on her skin were feeding something ancient and hungry. When her brothers sell her to the enemy Alpha to settle a blood debt, they think they're discarding trash. They don't realize they've just handed a weapon of extinction to the one wolf in the realm who has been dreaming of her face since the moment he was born. Get ready, because the Crimson Wolf is about to wake, and the brothers who sold her will learn that some debts can never be repaid. The Hollowfang pack house sat on the edge of the Wraithwood Forest, a sprawling stone manor that had seen better centuries. The walls were cracked, the gardens were dead. And in the basement where the servants once stored wine, Vela Morn was scrubbing bloodstains from the floor. Her brothers had hosted a gathering the night before. Pack warriors, gambling, drinking, and fighting. One of them had split another's skull open over a dice game. No one bothered to clean it. That was Vela's purpose. She worked on her hands and knees, using a rag so old it was more whole than fabric. Her fingers were numb from the cold water. Her knees ached against the stone. She was 21, an age when most she-wolves had already found their mates and born their first pups. But Vela had never shifted. She had never heard her wolf's voice. She was, according to her eldest brother Haldrick, an evolutionary mistake. Still at it? The voice came from the stairs. Vela didn't look up. She knew that voice. It belonged to Fenric, the middle brother, the one who never raised his fists but whose words cut deeper than claws. Almost finished, she whispered. Fenric descended the stairs slowly, his boots clicking against each step. He was lean where Haldrick was thick, handsome in a cold, angular way. He crouched beside her, tilting his head as if examining an insect. You missed a spot. He pointed to a section she had already cleaned twice. Do it again. Vela swallowed her protest and moved the rag to the indicated spot. Good girl. Fenric smiled. You know, I've always wondered what Mother saw in you. She died bringing you into this world, and for what? A defective runt who can't even shift. He stood, brushing imaginary dust from his trousers. Father should have drowned you at birth. Would have saved us all the embarrassment. He left without another word, his footsteps fading up the stairs. Vela sat frozen, the rag clenched in her white-knuckled fist. She would not cry. Tears were weakness, and weakness in the Hollowfang pack was an invitation for pain. She finished the floor and crept upstairs to the kitchen, hoping to find scraps before the cook threw them to the dogs. But the kitchen was not empty. All three of her brothers were seated at the table, and they were arguing. Haldrick, the eldest, was a mountain of muscle with a permanent scowl carved into his face. He had their father's brutal features and their father's brutal temper. Beside him sat Fenric, picking at his nails with a knife, and at the end of the table, looking like he wished he were anywhere else, was Torvin, the youngest brother. Torvin was the only one who had never struck her. He simply pretended she didn't exist. In some ways, that hurt more. We don't have the gold, Haldrick was growling. The Ironvale Dominion wants 50,000 crescents by the new moon, or they march on our territory. Then we fight, Fenric said lazily. Fight? Haldrick slammed his fist on the table. Their alpha has 10,000 wolves. We have 800. It would be a slaughter. Then we negotiate, Torvin offered quietly. Offer them something else. Land. Timber rights. They don't want land. Haldrick's voice dropped, his eyes shifting toward the doorway, toward Vela. She froze. They want a bride. The silence that followed was suffocating. Viola felt the blood drain from her face as all three brothers turned to look at her. Haldrick's lips curled into something that was almost a smile. The Ironvale Alpha sent a message last month. He's unmated. He's looking for a female of noble blood to seal an alliance. Haldrick stood, walking toward her with slow, deliberate steps. And you, dear sister, despite your many defects, are technically of noble blood. No. The word escaped before Viola could stop it. Please, you can't. Can't? Fenric laughed. Who's going to stop us? Your imaginary wolf? Haldrick grabbed her arm, his grip crushing. You'll do what you're told, Runt. For once in your miserable life, you'll be useful to this family. Viola looked at Torvin, her eyes pleading. He looked away. And in that moment, something deep inside her chest stirred. Not her heart. Something older. Something that had been sleeping for 21 years. It opened one eye. 3 days later, Vela stood at the northern border of Hollowfang territory, her wrists bound with silver-threaded rope that burned her skin. She wore a thin gray dress, unsuitable for the bitter wind that howled across the frozen plains. Her brothers had not given her a coat. They had not given her a farewell. Haldrick stood to her left, his arms crossed, watching the tree line with barely concealed impatience. Fenric was to her right, examining his reflection in a pocket mirror. Torvin lingered behind, silent as always. Where are they? Haldrick muttered. The message said dawn. Perhaps the great Alpha King is having second thoughts, Fenric drawled. Can't imagine why. We're offering him such a prize. He shot a mocking glance at Viola. She kept her eyes forward, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. The dawn mist was thick, rolling between the ancient pines like something alive. Vela's breath came in short puffs of white vapor. Her feet were numb inside her worn boots. If she died of exposure before the Ironvale wolves arrived, she wondered if her brothers would even notice. Then she felt it. A pressure in the air. A weight that seemed to press down on her lungs. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees, and the mist began to part. Figures emerged from the forest. They moved in perfect formation, silent as shadows, their black tactical armor absorbing the pale morning light. There were at least 30 of them, each one radiating a predatory stillness that made Haldrick take an involuntary step backward. But it was the man at the center who stole Vela's breath. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell across a face carved from granite and moonlight. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, pale against his tanned skin. His eyes were the color of a winter storm, gray and silver and utterly unreadable. He wore no crown, no ceremonial robes, just black leather and steel. But there was no mistaking what he was. The power rolling off him was suffocating. Alpha King Kalen Vex of the Ironvale Dominion. Vela's knees buckled, not from fear, from something else entirely. A magnetic tug in her gut, a heat that sparked behind her ribs despite the freezing wind. She didn't understand it. She couldn't explain it. But the moment his eyes found hers, Kalen Vex stopped walking. He went completely still. His warriors halted behind him, exchanging confused glances. The Alpha King's unreadable expression shifted, replaced by something Vela couldn't name. Shock. Recognition. Hunger. You, he breathed. The word was barely audible, but Vela heard it as if he had spoken directly into her mind. Haldrick stepped forward, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. Alpha Vex. As promised, we've brought the female. She's wolfless and a bit scrawny, but her blood is pure Hollowfang nobility. This should settle our debt in full. Kalen didn't look at him. His iron gaze remained locked on Vela, burning with an intensity that made her heart stammer. Who bound her? Kalen's voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. Haldrick blinked. The silver rope? It's a precaution. She's a flight risk. Not that she could get far with those weak legs. Who bound her? The question cut through the air like a blade. Fenric's smirk faltered. Torvin took a step back. Even Haldrick, for all his bluster, seemed to sense that something had shifted. Kaelin walked forward. His warriors parted for him like water around a stone. He stopped directly in front of Vela, so close she could smell him. Pine, wood smoke, and something electric, like the air before a lightning strike. He reached down and took her bound wrists in his hands. His touch was impossibly gentle. "I've seen your face every night since the moment I drew my first breath," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. "And in every dream, you were wearing a crown." Then, with a single flex of his grip, he snapped the silver rope like thread. The rope fell to the frozen ground. The burns on Vila's wrists were already beginning to fade, though she didn't notice. She was too busy staring at the Alpha King who had just destroyed her bindings as if they were made of paper. Haldrick found his voice first. "What are you doing? She's yours now. There's no need to—" "Yours?" Kaelin turned slowly. The movement was unhurried, almost lazy, but the threat beneath it was palpable. "You speak as if she were livestock." "She's a treaty bride," Fenric interjected, stepping beside Haldrick with a diplomatic smile. "A gift to seal our alliance. Surely you understand the transactional nature of—" "I understand that you bound a woman of noble blood with silver rope." Kaelin's voice hadn't risen, but the temperature seemed to drop another 10 degrees. "I understand that she arrived without a coat in the dead of winter. I understand that her wrists are scarred from more than just today's bindings." He took a step toward the brothers, then another. "I understand that you expected me to accept damaged goods and be grateful for it." Haldrick's face reddened. "Now see here, Alphavex, we had an agreement. 50,000 crescents or a bride of noble blood. We've delivered. The debt is cleared." "The debt is cleared," Kaelin agreed. His voice was soft as silk wrapped around a dagger. "But I find myself curious about something. You have 500 eligible she-wolves in your pack. Daughters of warriors, merchant families, even a few distant cousins of pure lineage, yet you chose to send me her." He gestured toward Vela without looking at her. "The one you beat, the one you starved, the one you kept in a basement." Kaelin tilted his head. "Why?" Fenric's composure faltered. "How do you know?" "I know everything." Kaelin smiled, and it was a terrible thing, all teeth and cold promise. "Did you think I would accept a bride without investigating her background? Did you think I was a fool?" He let the question hang in the air. "You sent her because you thought she was worthless, wolf-less. A shameful secret you could finally dispose of. You assumed I would use her, discard her, or simply let her die in the winter snows." Kaelin's slate-colored eyes darkened to iron. "You miscalculated." Haldrick's hand moved toward the blade at his waist. "Bad idea." In the span of a heartbeat, Kaelin's warriors had drawn their weapons. 30 bows, 30 blades, all aimed at the 3 Hollowfang brothers. "Touch that sword and you'll lose the hand," Kaelin said pleasantly. "Then I'll take the other one for making me repeat myself." Haldrick's hand froze. Vela watched this unfold in stunned silence. She had been prepared for humiliation. She had been prepared for cruelty. She had expected the enemy Alpha to look at her with the same disgust her brothers did. She had not expected this. Kaelin turned back to her, and his entire demeanor shifted. The cold fury melted away, replaced by something almost tender. He shrugged off his black leather coat and draped it around her shoulders. It was warm, heavy, and smelled like him. "Can you walk?" he asked quietly. Vila nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good." He offered her his arm, a gesture so formal, so respectful, that it made her throat tighten. "Then let me take you home, Vila Morn." He knew her name. He knew her name, and he spoke it like it mattered. You can't just take her and leave, Haldrick spluttered. We need assurances, documentation, a formal... Commander Rael, Kaelin said, not bothering to look back. A tall woman with silver-streaked hair stepped forward. Provide the Hollow Fang delegation with their documentation, then escort them back to their border. And if they resist, my king? Kaelin considered this for a moment. Then remind them that resisting the Ironvale Dominion is unwise. He began to walk, guiding Viola toward the tree line. His warriors fell into formation around them, a protective wall of black armor and deadly silence. Viola glanced back over her shoulder. Her brothers stood frozen in the snow, their faces cycling through confusion, anger, and something that might have been the first stirrings of fear. Fenric's mask had slipped entirely. He looked like he was going to be sick. Good, whispered a voice in Viola's mind, a voice she had never heard before. Low, ancient, hungry. Let them choke on their regret. Viola stumbled. Kaelin's hand tightened on her arm, steadying her. Easy, he murmured. You're safe now. But Vela barely heard him. Her heart was pounding. Her skin felt too tight. That voice, that beast coiled in her marrow, it was faint, barely a whisper, but it was there. Something inside her was waking up, and it was furious. Viola woke to warmth. It was such an unfamiliar sensation that for a moment she thought she was dead. Surely this was the afterlife. Soft sheets, a crackling fire, and the scent of lavender in the air. The basement floor had never smelled like lavender. She opened her eyes. The room was enormous. Vaulted ceilings of dark timber arched overhead, supported by beams carved with ancient wolf motifs. A fire roared in a stone hearth large enough to stand in. The bed beneath her was a cloud of silk and velvet, piled with furs so soft they felt like water against her skin. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed a view that stole her breath. Snow-capped mountains pierced a violet sky. Far below, she could see the glittering lights of a city carved directly into the mountainside. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. This was not Hollowfang territory. Vela sat up too quickly. Pain lanced through her skull and the room tilted. She grabbed the headboard, steadying herself. The disorientation will pass. The deep voice came from the shadows near the window. You've been asleep for almost 2 days. Your body needed to recover. Kaelin Vex stepped into the firelight. He had changed from his tactical armor into simple dark clothing, a gray sweater, black trousers. He looked almost approachable. Almost. The scar on his face caught the flickering light as he moved to a small table and poured water from a crystal pitcher. He brought it to her slowly, his movements deliberate, unthreatening. Drink, he said. You're dehydrated. Viola took the glass but didn't drink. Her fingers trembled against the crystal. Where am I? The Ironvale Citadel? My home. Kaelin sat in an armchair near the bed, maintaining a respectful distance. You collapsed at the border. The silver poisoning in your blood combined with exhaustion and malnutrition. My healers were concerned. Silver poisoning? The rope your brothers used wasn't ordinary silver. Kaelin's jaw tightened. It was alloyed with wolfsbane extract. Prolonged contact causes the metal to leach into the bloodstream. Another few hours and you would have suffered permanent nerve damage. Viola stared at the fading burns on her wrists. Her brothers had known. They had to have known. Why do you care? The question came out sharper than she intended. I'm just a treaty bride, a transaction. You said so yourself. I said your brothers saw you as a transaction. Kaelin leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. I never did. The firelight danced in his gunmetal stare. Vela felt that strange tether again, the inexplicable heat behind her ribs that defied explanation. You said something at the border, she whispered. You said you'd seen my face. In dreams. Since you were born. Kaelin was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough, as if the words cost him something. The dreams have been with me since my first night in this world. My mother told me I cried for hours after I was born, but the moment I fell asleep, I went quiet. She said I smiled. He paused. I was dreaming of you. Vila's breath caught. As an infant, I didn't understand the visions. Just colors, warmth, a presence that felt like safety. As I grew older, the dreams became clearer. I saw a woman running through a forest of fire. A woman standing on a mountain of bones, light pouring from her hands. A woman sitting by a frozen lake, and I could almost hear her voice. He looked at her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. By the time I was 12, I could draw your face from memory. I sent scouts to every pack on the continent with that sketch. No one recognized you. I began to think you were a ghost, a prophecy that would never come true. His voice dropped. Then I received your brother's offer, and the sketch they included matched perfectly. Vila set the water glass on the bedside table. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. That's impossible. Dreams don't work like that. You're lying. I have no reason to lie to you. Everyone has reasons to lie. Vela pulled the furs up to her chin, a pathetic barrier between herself and this impossible man. You're the enemy. Your pack and mine have been at war for 3 generations, and now you expect me to believe you've been dreaming about me like some kind of fated? She stopped herself. The word hung in the air, unspoken but deafening. Mate. Kaelin didn't flinch. I don't expect you to believe anything yet, Vila. I only expect you to listen. He stood, walking toward the door. At the threshold, he paused. Tomorrow, my council's historian will visit you. There are things you need to know about your bloodline, things your brothers clearly kept from you. He glanced back over his shoulder. Things that will explain why a wolfless woman has been haunting the dreams of an Alpha King since the day he was born. He left, closing the door softly behind him. Vila sat in the enormous bed, surrounded by luxury she had never known, and felt the thing behind her ribs stir again. That presence, that voice. It wasn't words this time, it was a feeling. Recognition. The historian arrived at midday. Her name was Thessaly Orin, and she was ancient in the way that only wolves who had lived through centuries could be. Her face was a map of wrinkles, her hair pure white, but her eyes were sharp as obsidian chips. She carried a leather satchel stuffed with scrolls and a single black lockbox. Vela sat across from her in the sitting room adjacent to her chambers. She had been given new clothes, soft wool trousers and a fitted tunic of deep burgundy. It was the finest thing she had ever worn. You are afraid, Thessaly observed, lowering herself into a chair. Good. Fear means you are paying attention. I'm not afraid, Vila lied. I'm confused. Your king claims he's been dreaming about me since birth. He claims I have some hidden bloodline. None of this makes sense. Thessaly smiled, revealing teeth that were slightly too sharp. It will. But first, tell me what you know of your mother. Vela hesitated. Nothing. She died when I was born. My father never spoke of her. My brothers said she was a low-ranking Omega from a minor pack. Nothing special. Your brothers are liars. Thessaly opened her satchel and pulled out a rolled parchment, yellowed with age. Your mother was not low-ranking. She was not from a minor pack. And she was certainly not nothing special. She unfurled the parchment. It was a genealogical chart, branches and names spreading like roots across the page. At the very top, inscribed in red ink, was a symbol Vila didn't recognize. A crescent moon dripping 3 drops of blood. The crimson lineage, Thessaly said, the original ruling bloodline of our kind. They predate the pack system, the alpha hierarchy, even the mate bond as we know it. They were conduits of the blood moon, wolves who could channel the raw power of our goddess. Vela stared at the symbol. Her heart was hammering. That's mythology. Children's stories. History becomes mythology when it suits those in power to forget it. Thessaly traced her finger down the chart, stopping at a name near the bottom. Seraphine Veloth. Your mother. The name hit Vela like a physical blow. She had never known her mother's name. Her brothers had never told her. Your mother was the last surviving heir of the Crimson lineage, Thessaly continued. She fled her own pack when she was 17, after a faction called the Hollow Flame murdered the rest of her family. She changed her name, hid among the lower ranks, and eventually mated with your father, a brute who had no idea what treasure he had claimed. Vela's mouth was dry. If my mother was so powerful, why didn't she fight back? Why did she die giving birth to me? Thessaly's expression darkened. Because someone poisoned her. Someone who knew what you would become if you were allowed to develop naturally. She opened the black lockbox. Inside, nestled in red velvet, was a small vial of dark liquid and a silver medallion engraved with the blood drop crescent. Wolfsbane compound, Thessaly said, holding up the vial. We found trace amounts in your bloodstream during your treatment, but the concentration suggests you've been ingesting it for years. Decades, perhaps. The room seemed to tilt. Viola gripped the arms of her chair. Your brothers have been poisoning you since you were an infant, Thessaly said flatly, keeping your wolf in a coma, keeping you weak, controllable, and ignorant of your own power. No. Viola shook her head. That can't be right. Why would they? Because a fully awakened Crimson Wolf could tear their pack apart with a thought. Thessaly's voice was hard as iron. Because you are not a defective Omega, Vela Morn. You are a weapon of extinction wrapped in human skin, and your brothers knew it. Thessaly leaned forward, her ancient eyes gleaming. There is more. The Crimson Wolves were known for two gifts. The first was destruction, raw, devastating power that could level mountains. But the second was rarer, appearing only once every few generations. She paused. The gift of restoration, the ability to heal wounds, purge poisons, even pull souls back from the edge of death. Vela's breath caught. You think I have this gift? I think you have both. Thessaly's voice was reverent. You are the first Crimson heir in 800 years to carry the full bloodline, destroyer and healer, death and life. The door opened. Kalen walked in, his expression unreadable. You've told her, he said to Thessaly. It wasn't a question. She needed to know. Thessaly gathered her materials. What happens next is your conversation, my king. She left, and the silence that followed was suffocating. Kalen crossed the room and knelt in front of Vela's chair, bringing himself to her eye level. It was such an unexpected gesture of humility that it broke through her spiraling panic. I know this is overwhelming, he said quietly. I know you have no reason to trust me. I am the enemy your brothers warned you about your entire life. Then why are you helping me? Viola's voice wavered. What do you want from me? I want to help you become what you were always meant to be. Kalen held her gaze. The wolfsbane is leaving your system. Your wolf is waking up. But if you shift without training, without control, you could hurt yourself or others. You could level this entire citadel. He extended his hand, palm up. Let me train you. Let me show you how to harness this power instead of being consumed by it. And when you're ready, when you're strong, you can decide what to do with it. Stay here. Leave. Return to your brothers and burn their house to the ground. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. I would recommend the third option, personally. Viola looked at his outstretched hand. She thought of the basement, the cold, the hunger, the rope burns. She thought of Fenric's cruel smile and Haldric's crushing grip and Torvin's cowardly silence. She thought of her mother, murdered before she could even hold her daughter. The caged wolf inside her pulsed, agreement, anticipation. Vela reached out and took Kaelin's hand. "Teach me," she said. "Teach me how to make them regret ever touching me." 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of training, of pushing her body beyond limits she didn't know she had. 2 weeks of Kaelin teaching her to fight, to sense the boundaries of her own aura, to coax the sleeping beast inside her toward wakefulness without letting it explode. 2 weeks of meals that actually filled her stomach. 2 weeks of sleeping in a real bed. 2 weeks of people looking at her with respect instead of disgust. It was the happiest Vela had ever been, and that terrified her more than anything. She stood in the Citadel's training courtyard, sweat dripping down her temples despite the freezing air. Kaelin circled her, correcting her stance, adjusting the grip on her practice blade. "You're still dropping your left shoulder," he said. "A trained fighter would exploit that opening in a heartbeat." "Then stop circling me like a vulture and actually attack." Kaelin raised an eyebrow. A smile tugged at his scarred lips. He moved. Vela barely saw it. One moment he was 3 feet away. The next his blade was at her throat. His body pressed against her back. His breath warm against her ear. "Dead," he murmured. Vila's heart was pounding, and not just from the exertion. The heat behind her ribs flared. Her wolf stirred, restless, wanting. "That's cheating," she managed. "You used alpha speed. Your enemies won't fight fair." Kaelin stepped back, giving her space. "Neither should you." Before Vela could respond, a horn sounded from the Citadel walls. 3 sharp blasts. Warning. Kaelin's expression hardened. "Stay here." "What's happening?" He was already moving toward the gate. Commander Rael met him halfway, her face grim. "3 wolves at the southern border, my king. They're demanding an audience." Rael's jaw tightened. "They're from Hollowfang." Vela's blood turned to ice. No, not yet. Not when she was finally starting to feel safe. Kaelin glanced back at her. Something fierce flashed in his winter storm eyes. "Let them in," he said. "I want to hear what they have to say." The throne room of the Ironvale Citadel was carved from black granite, lit by torches that burned with blue flame. The obsidian throne sat on a raised dais, a seat of power that radiated cold authority. Kaelin sat upon it, his posture relaxed but his gaze sharp as daggers. Vela stood to his right, wearing the training leathers she hadn't had time to change out of. She refused to hide. She refused to cower. "Let them see me," she thought. "Let them see what they threw away." The doors opened. Haldrick strode in first, his bulk barely contained by his formal armor. Fenric followed, his diplomatic mask firmly in place, and behind them, looking like he wanted to disappear into the floor, was Torvin. Haldrick's eyes found Vila immediately. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, at her clean clothes and straight posture. At the muscle she had already started to build. At the way she met his gaze without flinching. "Alpha Vex," Haldrick said, executing a stiff bow. "Thank you for receiving us." "I didn't receive you out of courtesy," Kaelin replied. "I received you because I'm curious what possible reason you could have for showing your face in my territory after our last conversation." Fenric stepped forward, smooth as oil. "We've come to discuss a misunderstanding regarding our sister." There was no misunderstanding. Kaelin's voice could have frozen the torches. "You sold her. I bought her. Transaction complete." "Ah, but that's precisely the issue." Fenric's smile didn't reach his eyes. "You see, we've recently discovered that the terms of our agreement may have been incomplete." He pulled a scroll from his coat. "According to the old laws, a female of noble blood cannot be transferred between packs without her formal consent, documented and witnessed by a neutral party. We have no such documentation." Fenric's smile widened. "Which means, legally speaking, the transfer is void." Vela is still Hollow Fang property. Vela's hands curled into fists. Property. Even now, that's all she was to them. Furthermore, Fenric continued, we've learned that our sister may possess certain hereditary qualities that were not disclosed at the time of sale. The Ironvale Dominion cannot legally retain a Crimson lineage heir without the approval of the Continental Council. The throne room went deathly silent. Kaelin leaned forward, his eyes darkening. And how, exactly, did you learn about her lineage? Fenric hesitated. It was Haldrick who answered, his voice a growl. We intercepted one of your messengers 3 days ago. The fool was carrying a report about her bloodwork to the Continental Archives. His lips twisted into a sneer. You should train your couriers better. Kaelin's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. What matters, Haldrick continued, is that she belongs to us. She's our blood. Our responsibility. Your responsibility? Vila's voice cut through the hall like a blade. All eyes turned to her. She stepped forward, descending 1 step from the dais. You starved me. You beat me. You kept me in a basement like an animal for 21 years. Her voice was steady, but the rage beneath it was molten. You poisoned me since infancy to keep my wolf asleep. And now you want me back? Haldrick's face reddened. You don't understand the complexities. I understand perfectly. Vila took another step. The beast inside her was growling, pressing against its cage. You didn't know what I was worth. And now that you do, you want to profit from me again. Vela. Torvin's voice was barely a whisper. Please, just come home. We can work this out. She looked at her youngest brother. For a moment. Just a moment. She saw the boy who used to sneak her extra bread when no one was watching. The boy who had stopped, eventually, because it was easier to pretend she didn't exist. I have no home, Vila said quietly. You made sure of that. Fenric's mask slipped. Anger flashed beneath the surface. The council will hear of this, he spat. You cannot keep a Crimson heir against the old laws. If you do not return her willingly, we will petition for a trial of blood. The words echoed through the throne room. Kaelin rose from the throne. He descended the steps slowly, each footfall deliberate. A trial of blood, he repeated. You would invoke the ancient rites over a woman you treated as garbage? We invoke them over a woman who is legally ours. Haldrick stepped forward, emboldened. The choice is simple, Alpha Vex. Return her, or face the trial. Kaelin stopped directly in front of Haldrick. Despite the Hollow Fang Alpha's bulk, Kaelin seemed to tower over him. Then I accept your trial, Kaelin said softly. But not for me. For her. Haldrick blinked. What? Kaelin turned to Vela. The trial of blood is an ancient challenge to determine rightful ownership, but the old laws also state that any party to the dispute may choose to represent themselves. His eyes met hers. You don't have to do this, Vila. I can fight for you. I will win. Vela looked at her brothers. She saw Haldrick's smug certainty, Fenric's calculating eyes, Torvin's pathetic guilt. She thought of 21 years of pain. No, she said. This is my fight. Her wolf howled in agreement. The Council of Elders arrived 3 days later. They came in a procession of black carriages drawn by wolves the size of horses, their ancient forms wrapped in gray ceremonial robes. 5 elders in total, each one representing a cardinal territory of the werewolf realm. Their faces were hidden beneath deep hoods, but their power was unmistakable, a pressure in the air that made even Kaelin's elite guards shift uncomfortably. The trial would be held at the Frostfire Arena, an ancient coliseum carved into the mountain behind the citadel. The floor was volcanic glass, black and razor-sharp, heated from below by magma vents. It was a place where disputes had been settled in blood for over 1,000 years. Vila stood at the edge of the arena, looking down at the obsidian floor. In a few hours she would be standing on that glass, fighting for her freedom. You can still change your mind. Kalen's voice came from behind her. He had been watching her for the past hour, saying nothing, giving her space. No, I can't. Viola didn't turn around. If you fight for me, I'll always be the woman who needed saving, the weak Omega who couldn't stand on her own. There's no shame in accepting help. There is, when the help proves them right. Viola finally turned. Kalen stood in the doorway, his arms crossed, his expression torn between frustration and something softer. My brothers think I'm nothing, she continued. They've thought it my entire life. If I hide behind you now, I'll be proving them right. I'll be the helpless runt they always said I was. Kalen was silent for a long moment. Then he crossed the distance between them and took her hands in his. Your wolf is still waking, he said quietly. You've only been training for 2 weeks. Haldrick has been fighting since he could walk. Then I'll have to be smarter than him. And if you're not? If he overpowers you? Vela met his gaze. The invisible tether between them was stronger than ever. That inexplicable bond that made her want to lean into him, to trust him completely. Then at least I'll go down fighting, she said. That's more than I ever had before. Kalen's jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he would argue further. Instead, he lifted her hands to his lips and pressed a kiss to her scarred knuckles. Then fight, Viola Morn. And when you win? His eyes darkened with promise. We'll discuss what comes next. The horn sounded. The trial was beginning. The arena was packed. Wolves from every territory had gathered to witness the spectacle. A crimson heir fighting for her freedom against the brother who had sold her. The elders sat in the highest box, their hooded faces inscrutable. Vala descended the stone steps to the arena floor. The volcanic glass was warm beneath her bare feet. She wore simple fighting leathers, her pale hair braided back from her face. Across the arena, Haldrick was already waiting. He had stripped to the waist, his massive torso covered in battle scars and ceremonial tattoos. He was grinning. "Little sister," he called out, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "I'm going to enjoy this." "Rules of engagement," the head elder announced, his voice magically amplified. "No weapons, no external interference. Shift is permitted. The fight ends when one party submits, is incapacitated, or is dead." Vela's heart hammered against her ribs. Her wolf was pressing against the thinning walls of its cage, eager, hungry. Additionally, the elder continued, as this trial involves a disputed crimson heir, the ancient protocols apply. Should the claimant lose, she will be returned to Hollow Fang custody. Should she win, all claims upon her are forfeit, and she is declared a free wolf under the protection of the Continental Council. Free. The word tasted like hope. Haldrick flexed his neck, rolling his massive shoulders. "I won't kill you," he said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. "I'll just break enough bones that you'll never walk again. Then you can spend the rest of your life crawling on the floor where you belong." Viola said nothing. She simply raised her fists. The elder's voice rang out. "Begin." Haldrick didn't shift immediately. He wanted to humiliate her first. Viola could see it in his eyes, the need to prove his dominance in human form before unleashing his wolf. He thought this would be easy. He thought she was still the starving girl who flinched at his shadow. He was wrong. Haldrick charged, his massive fist swinging toward her head with enough force to shatter stone. Vela didn't block. She flowed. The movement came from somewhere deep inside her. Instinctual. Ancient. She sidestepped his blow by inches, feeling the wind of his knuckles against her cheek, and drove her elbow into his kidney. Haldrick grunted, stumbling forward. The crowd gasped. He spun, his face twisted with surprise and fury. Lucky shot. Was it? Viola circled him, light on her feet. The volcanic glass was warm but not painful. She could feel energy thrumming up through the floor, feeding the beast inside her. Haldrick attacked again, faster this time, a combination of strikes that would have overwhelmed any normal opponent. But Viola wasn't normal. Not anymore. She ducked, weaved, deflected. Every movement felt like water flowing around stone. Her wolf was guiding her, lending her speed and instinct she had never possessed before. She landed a palm strike to Haldrick's sternum. He staggered backward, wheezing. "Impossible," he snarled. "You're wolf-less. You're nothing." "Keep telling yourself that." Haldrick roared and shifted. The transformation was brutal and fast, bones snapping and reshaping in seconds. Where her brother had stood, a massive gray wolf now crouched, easily 8 feet at the shoulder. His eyes burned with amber rage, and saliva dripped from fangs the size of daggers. He lunged. Viola closed her eyes. "Come out," she whispered to the presence inside her. "It's time." The cage shattered. Red light exploded from Viola's body, so bright that the spectators shielded their eyes. Pain ripped through her, but it wasn't the agony she had expected. It was release. It was freedom. 21 years of suppression, of poison, of chains, all of it burning away in an instant. When the light faded, Viola was gone. In her place stood the Crimson Wolf. She was enormous, larger than Haldrick by half, her fur the deep red of arterial blood. Her eyes blazed like molten gold, and veins of crimson light pulsed beneath her coat like living fire. The volcanic glass beneath her paws began to splinter from the sheer pressure of her aura. Every wolf in the arena dropped to their knees, not by choice, by compulsion. The Crimson Wolf's dominance was absolute, a weight that pressed down on their very souls. Only Haldrick remained standing, but his legs were trembling. The arrogance had drained from his wolf's eyes, replaced by primal terror. Vela didn't give him time to recover. She moved like lightning, crossing the arena in a single bound, her jaws closed around Haldrick's throat, not to kill, but to control. She lifted him off his paws and slammed him into the volcanic glass with enough force to split the floor. Haldrick yelped, thrashing wildly. He clawed at her chest, drawing blood, but Viola barely felt it. The pain only sharpened her focus. She pressed down harder, her golden eyes boring into his. "Submit." The command wasn't spoken. It was projected directly into his mind, a psychic shockwave that left no room for resistance. Haldrick's wolf went limp. A pitiful whine escaped his throat. His tail tucked between his legs and his head turned, exposing his jugular in the ultimate gesture of surrender. The crowd was silent. Then a single howl rose from the stands, a salute to the victor. Others joined, and within seconds, the arena was filled with the sound of 500 wolves acknowledging her dominance. Viola released her brother and stepped back. She shifted to human form, standing naked and bloodied on the fractured glass. Kalen was already vaulting over the arena wall, his coat in hand. He wrapped it around her before the crowd could gawk, pulling her against his chest. "You did it," he breathed. "You actually did it." Viola looked down at Haldrick, who was shifting back to human form, curled in a fetal position, sobbing. "I submit," Haldrick gasped. "I submit. She's free. She's free." The head elder rose from his seat. "The trial is decided. Vela Morn is declared a free wolf, bound to no pack, protected by the Continental Council." His ancient voice carried across the arena. "All claims from the Hollow Fang pack are hereby forfeit." Vela sagged against Kalen, exhaustion crashing over her. But before she could speak, a scream cut through the cheering. Fenric. He had drawn a blade, a short silver dagger that gleamed with poison. He was sprinting toward the arena floor, his diplomatic mask completely gone, replaced by murderous desperation. "If I can't have her, no one will." He threw the dagger. Time seemed to slow. Viola saw the blade spinning toward her heart. She was too exhausted to move, too drained to shift. But Kalen moved. He spun, putting his body between her and the blade. The dagger sank into his shoulder with a sickening thunk. Kaelin staggered but didn't fall. He looked down at the poisoned blade protruding from his flesh, then up at Fenric, who had frozen mid-stride. That, Kaelin said, calmly, was a mistake. His guards were on Fenric in seconds, forcing him to his knees, but Vila wasn't looking at her brother. She was looking at the black vein spreading from Kaelin's wound, the poison racing toward his heart. "No," she whispered. "No. No, no." She pressed her hands against his chest, and without understanding how, she reached inside herself and pulled. Crimson light flowed from her palms into his body. The black veins began to retreat, burning away under the onslaught of her power. Thessaly's words echoed in her mind, destroyer and healer, death and life. Kaelin gasped, his eyes widening. The dagger was pushed out of his flesh by an invisible force clattering to the ground. The wound sealed itself, leaving only a faint scar. Vila collapsed against him, utterly spent. "How did you do that?" Kaelin breathed. "I don't know," she whispered. "I just couldn't let you die." Above them, the elders were conferring rapidly. The head elder's voice rang out once more. "The Crimson Wolf has demonstrated the gift of restoration, a power not seen in over 800 years. His hood turned toward Vela. "This changes everything." Fenric was dragged to the dungeons. Haldric was escorted to the border under armed guard, banished from all allied territories for 10 years. But Torvin remained. He knelt before Vela in the Citadel's great hall, his head bowed, his shoulders shaking. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I knew it was wrong. I knew what they were doing to you, and I said nothing." Vila looked down at the brother who had pretended she didn't exist. The brother who had let her starve, let her suffer, because it was easier than standing up. "Why are you here, Torvin?" "Because you deserve an apology. And because—" He swallowed hard. "Because I came to warn you." Kaelin stepped forward, his newly healed shoulder rolling beneath his shirt. "Warn us about what?" Torvin looked up, and there was genuine fear in his eyes. "The Hollow Flame, the faction that killed your mother." He looked at Vila. "They know you've awakened. They're coming. They've been waiting for this moment for 21 years. A cold wind seemed to sweep through the hall. "How many?" Kaelin demanded. "Hundreds, maybe 1,000. They've been hiding in the Ashlands, building their forces." Torvin's voice faltered. "They believe the Crimson bloodline is an abomination. They won't stop until every trace of it is destroyed." Vela felt the familiar stirring in her chest. Her wolf was growling, not with fear, but with anticipation. Let them come. A horn sounded from the walls, then another, then a dozen. Commander Riel burst through the doors, her face pale. "My king, the eastern perimeter has been breached. An army is marching through the Shadow Pass. They're wearing silver masks." "The Hollow Flame." Kaelin's expression hardened. He turned to Vila, his eyes searching her face. "You don't have to fight. You've already proven yourself. You can stay here, where it's safe." Vela thought of her mother, dying alone, unable to protect her daughter. She thought of 21 years of poison, of beatings, of being told she was worthless. She was done hiding. "Give me a sword," she said, "and point me toward the enemy." The battle was chaos. The Hollow Flame had breached the outer walls with explosives, pouring into the citadel like a tide of silver and steel. Their wolves were rabid, feral, driven by fanatical hatred. They didn't fight to win. They fought to destroy. Vela moved through the carnage like a crimson ghost. She had shifted fully, her massive form tearing through enemies with brutal efficiency. But for every flame soldier she killed, 2 more seemed to take their place. At the center of the invasion stood their leader, a towering figure in ornate silver armor, wielding a staff topped with a black crystal that pulsed with corrupt energy, Vorthax the Purifier. He had been hunting the Crimson bloodline for decades. He had killed Vela's grandparents, her aunts, her uncles. He had ordered the poison that had kept her wolf asleep, and now he was here to finish the job. "There you are," Vorthax's voice echoed across the battlefield, amplified by dark magic. "The last little ember of a dying fire. I'm going to enjoy snuffing you out." He raised his staff and unleashed a beam of black energy directly at Vela. She dodged, but barely. The beam struck the wall behind her, and the stone simply ceased to exist, vaporized into nothing. Vela shifted back to human form, gasping. Her wolf was powerful, but this magic was something else entirely. Something ancient and wrong. Vorthax advanced, his staff charging for another blast. "Your mother begged, you know," he said conversationally. "When my agents poisoned her, she begged for your life, promised to give up her power, her heritage, everything. And we let her think we agreed." He smiled beneath his silver mask. "Then we poisoned you anyway." Something inside Vela snapped. Not the cage this time, the limiter on her soul. She stopped fighting the power. She stopped trying to control it. She let it consume her entirely. Crimson light erupted from her body, brighter than the sun, hotter than the volcanic glass. Her eyes became twin stars. Her voice became the voice of a goddess. "You killed my mother." The words weren't spoken. They were carved into reality itself. Vela raised her hand. Vorthax tried to fire his staff, but the black crystal shattered before he could complete the motion. He was lifted off his feet by an invisible force, his armor crumpling like paper. "You poisoned me. You stole my childhood. You made me believe I was worthless." Her fist closed. Vorthax screamed as the pressure increased. His bones began to shatter. His mask disintegrated, revealing a face twisted in agony and terror. "And now," Vela whispered, her voice echoing with ancient power, "you will pay." She opened her hand. Vorthax exploded into crimson ash, the remaining hollow flame. Soldiers froze. Then, as one, they dropped their weapons and fled into the night. Vela swayed, the divine light fading from her skin. She collapsed, but Kalen caught her before she hit the ground. "I've got you," he murmured, pulling her close. "I've always got you." Vela looked up at him, exhausted beyond measure, but finally at peace. "Is it over?" she whispered. Kalen pressed his forehead to hers. "The war is over," he said softly. "But our story is just beginning." 6 months later, the Iron Veil Citadel had never looked more beautiful. Banners of crimson and black hung from every tower. Flowers imported from the southern territories lined the Great Hall. Representatives from every pack on the continent had gathered to witness what many had thought impossible, the coronation of a Crimson Queen. Vela stood before a mirror in her chambers, barely recognizing the woman who stared back at her. She wore a gown of deep red silk embroidered with threads of gold. A crown of black iron and rubies rested on her pale hair. Her violet eyes, now permanently flecked with gold, held a quiet strength that had been forged in fire. A knock at the door. "Enter." Torvin stepped inside, dressed in the formal attire of a Citadel advisor, a position Kalen had offered him after he'd proven his loyalty during the Hollow Flame attack. He still carried guilt in his eyes, probably always would, but he was trying to make amends. "It's time, Your Majesty," he said quietly. Vila smiled. "You don't have to call me that." "Yes, I do." Torvin bowed his head. "You earned it." They walked together to the great hall. The doors opened, and 1,000 wolves rose to their feet. Kalen waited at the end of the aisle, standing before the twin thrones that had been installed on the dais. He looked magnificent in black and silver, his iron gaze fixed on her with an intensity that made her heart stutter. She walked toward him, and with every step, she felt the weight of her past falling away. The basement, the starvation, the beatings, the poison, gone. She reached the dais, and Kalen took her hand, raising it to his lips. "You look beautiful," he murmured. "You look acceptable," she replied, and he laughed. A rare, genuine sound that made the crowd murmur with surprise. The head elder stepped forward, holding the ceremonial crown. "Vela Morn, last heir of the Crimson lineage, do you accept the mantle of queen to rule beside King Kalen Vex and protect the wolves of this realm?" Vela looked out at the crowd. She saw Torvin, standing proud. She saw Commander Rael, nodding with respect. She saw hundreds of wolves who had once been strangers, now her people. "I accept." The crown was placed upon her head. The hall erupted into cheers. Kalen pulled her close, his lips brushing her ear. "They're all kneeling for you now," he whispered. "The girl who scrubbed floors, the runt they threw away." Vela turned to face him, her golden-flecked eyes shining. "No," she said softly. "They're kneeling for the woman who rose from the ashes." She kissed him then, in front of the entire court, and the cheers became a roar. Far away, at the edge of the Hollowfang border, Haldrick watched the distant celebration through a spyglass. His face was gaunt, his body weakened by months of exile. Beside him, Fenric sat in chains, awaiting transfer to a continental prison. Haldrick lowered the spyglass, his hands trembling. "We made a mistake," he whispered. "We made 100 mistakes." Fenric spat. "And now we'll pay for every single one." The brothers had sold their sister to settle a debt. They never imagined she would become the most powerful wolf in the realm. They never imagined she would make them kneel. If you enjoyed this story and want more tales of rejected mates, hidden bloodlines, and enemies who become lovers, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.